Welcome to TC Talks, a podcast brought to you by the Teaching Commons at York University. We will begin this podcast with an acknowledgement of the land on which we are situated. We recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. It is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region.
Thank you for joining us in our inaugural episode of TC Talks. In this episode, we will be discussing the highlights, the lowlights of the upcoming academic new year. What do you do to get ready for your classes? What do you do to help your students throughout your term? I'm Mandy Frake-Mistek, educational developer in the Teaching Commons. Joining me today in the big red chairs are Lisa Endersby and Brian Nairn, educational developers at the Teaching Commons. Happy New Year, Brian. Happy New Year, Lisa.
Happy New Year, Mandy.
Happy New Year.
Brian, tell me, what do you do to get ready for your new term? Because you're planning for a brand new course.
Yeah, the brand new course is always an interesting time. It makes me think back to back in the day of getting ready for the first day of school when you're a kid, right? You go to the store and you load up on your pens and pencils and colored pencils, and you have this pencil case or kit.
I love pencil cases.
And so though the items themselves have changed over the years, right, it's this notion of loading up your kit with whatever you need to start the year that never actually goes away.
So what's in your kit, Brian?
Right, and so as Mandy said, I'm coming at this from the lens of teaching a new course for the first time. And so I look at these broad tools that need to get honed at the start of the academic new year. So I look at these as technical tools, content tools, and delivery tools. And there's some degree of overlap between each of these. So from the technical side, right, it's just getting familiar with the LMS, so Moodle at York. For me, that's one of the key aspects of getting ready to teach a new course is familiarizing yourself with Moodle, figuring out how to lay out the course website, what can you upload right away, what can be visible. So that leads into now this content and delivery aspect. Ideally, you have a few weeks of lectures ready to go ahead of time, so you can focus your energy on delivering the content. I guess ultimately for me, it's about trying to get ready, trying to get as far ahead as you can in the course before that whirlwind hits and scramble mode kicks in.
Do you know, when you mentioned about planning for the curriculum, like the actual the lessons themselves, you know what I thought was so funny was during TIFF with the opening keynote, so Eric Cam talked about, he said, well, you've got a day and a half worth of classes. What? No, they're 12 weeks. But when he broke it down, so you've got 12 weeks. Here, a lot of our courses are 3 hours. So that's 36 hours. Yeah, it's a day and a half, which is like zero time.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of time at all.
No kidding.
Anyway, so that, things that we've all known, but thinking about it that way, I don't know, that just resonated a whole lot.
Yeah. Makes you think about how you plan and what you're planning for, and knowing that you've got that limited amount of time. What are you going to prioritize? What's going to be most important in that in-class time? That's interesting.
What do you do, Lisa?
Well, I was thinking a lot about the same things that Brian said, but certainly not in the most articulate or most creative metaphor kind of way. But I'm also thinking about the tone that I set in the class. So there's the content and the curriculum, but I've also been more and more aware over time of how I establish relationships with my students, or how I establish relationships with anybody who's going to be in the classroom. So I think, it's kind of nerdy, but I think about Sanford's challenge and support model a lot, and what expectations am I going to set? Are they high expectations? Are they meaningful expectations? But also, how am I explicitly demonstrating that I'm going to support them? And that doesn't end in the first class, but it's really important to set that tone in the first class. So it's ditto to everything that Brian said, but I've just, for me, I've had challenges in the past with thinking about how I set that tone and establish those relationships. So that's been really top of mind for me lately.
Janet Morrison, who was our former VP student, she's now president at Sheridan College, but she used to present that model at new faculty orientation. So, and I think now we share it with our graduate students in TAC too. So,
yeah,
I mean, the models, it's got a great place and it's a helpful frame. But setting or meeting your students, and for the first time, for most of them, if not all, on the first day of class. I don't know, when I think about the first day of class and when I've been trying to get ready for the first day of class, that either involves a night of not sleeping or, I hate to say throwing up, maybe wanting to throw up, because you're right, like I think trying to begin to foster those relationships with the students start from the very first day, and that used to, it used to scare the dickens out of me, but it was also, I think it was more excitement rather than being scared.
Yeah.
Who am I going to meet? But it's thinking about how I'm going to do that. How am I going to start to foster these relationships? Are there things that you do?
So one thing, it's interesting that you brought up our graduate students, because the TACT course that we teach here, and the one I just taught, I talked about Sanford probably longer than I needed to because I just got really excited about it. But also there's a part in TACT where we talk about, I guess it's the demographics of who the students are at York. And one thing that I do is maybe not a concrete strategy in the classroom yet, but even preparing for that first day especially, there's something really powerful for me about checking my assumptions. So the students that are here now are not the students that I went to school with. And I'm no longer a student in that sense. And while there are some similarities, like this number is about the number of commuter students, the number of first generation students, the students who are working to pay for school. And it's kind of like that check, this class is not the only thing in their life. And a lot of cases is kind of lower on the priority list than a lot of other things in their life. So when I talk about expectations, sometimes my expectations are related to things like time spent or what are you going to be working on? And I can very easily fall into thinking about my class as like, well, this is, the only thing in the world right now. And it's absolutely not. So some of the expectation management is, this is what it's expected. This is how I can help you do this work. But just that lens of, this is not the only thing in their life. Or they're going to be challenged by doing these types of things that I take for granted. So what language do I use? Like when we talk about experiential education, if I want them to reflect, do they even know what that means?
Right.
Or how to do that well? Yeah. So we're going to have this reflection paper and it's going to be worth 20%. So I want you to think about the class and then write your thoughts. And I'm being somewhat facetious, but I could also see myself in my early years just, of course that's enough information. But it's really not.
And I think, at least the way I try to frame the expectations, because I think how we be together, how we're going to be together needs to be talked about, not only the first day, but that's setting the landscape to come back to on future teaching and learning occasions in that class. But it's also knowing that they have expectations, that our students have expectations of us, and that we're accountable too, and that we're going to screw up too, but it's okay because we're going to talk about that and we're going to be honest about what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and what we're hoping to support them in achieving by the end of the term.
Yeah.
But I think often, I don't know, in my experience, I remember there being a time when I realized I was never talking about what, or even asking them what they could expect of me. What assumptions do they have of me when they're coming into my class? And I'm going to show up on time, hopefully prepare, hopefully know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I was thinking the same thing. I hope so too. But just realizing that I hadn't had those conversations before. And I noticed the change in how we were together, how we came to be together once I started having those conversations.
Yeah, particularly for all the first generation students who have no idea what this is going to be like.
Yeah, and that's actually funny because that was what I was thinking about as kind of something that actually makes me a little bit nervous when I get into starting to think about a class. Is getting that first kind of lecture out of the way. You don't know what the vibe of the class is going to be like going into it. I'm trying to get a sense of the group that you have. And it's usually that first kind of exposure of yourself to the students as well. To spend the first few minutes of class, especially on the first lecture, just getting, talking about myself and kind of how I got to, from my journey of education, from starting undergrad to standing in front of a lecture hall of students, some personal tidbits on the side. So it's that kind kind of first exposure and not really knowing what the reaction is going to be, that can be quite nerve-wracking as well.
And remind me the disciplines that you teach in.
Right, so I have it's a kinesiology background, so I teach more on the, I guess, the science side of things. So I've taught biomechanics, research methods, and I'll be teaching a blended first-year anatomy and physiology course coming up in the fall.
Blended's going to have its own interesting challenges too.
Yes, it will be a unique challenge. I think it's hard. It's interesting. A topic, especially as specific as anatomy and physiology, it might come across as, oh, like how do you get that experience without being, you know, like in a lab or looking at those dissections or anything like that. But I think with the way online tools are moving towards now, there's a lot of opportunity to get unique learning experiences without actually having to be in the lab. So without having to worry about the resources of going to a cadaver lab or, you know, or just the logistics of even computer space or whatnot. So having the students have the access to these online platforms, which should help promote their learning. At the time of this recording, I have not dug into the online tools as much yet, so that's something I'm really looking forward to. It's getting to play with some of the online features.
That's so cool.
Is that what you're most excited about for this academic new year?
I think so. Getting back into the classroom is kind of exciting for me. You know, I've always enjoyed teaching. I've learned to enjoy teaching over the years with some practice, I suppose. But it's been a few years since I've been in front of a classroom, so I'm actually looking forward to getting back into that side of things again.
Very cool. Lisa, what about you?
What excites me the most?
Yeah.
It's so cheesy. I just love working with students.
Yeah.
Which I know is the, you know, standard interview question of like, tell me about like your grade. I just love students, but I really do. And it's so neat because every year it's different, kind of like what you were saying too. Like you don't know what the vibe of the class is going to be like. And as terrifying as that might be, it's so cool that you have this chance to learn from and with this new group of people. Again, like I'm using all of the like Pinterest, super cheesy tropes maybe, but like you do learn so much from the students. And so it's so cool to come into a space where you may feel not prepared or whatnot, but you know that it's new, you know that it's exciting, and they're going to teach you as much, or if not more, than you're going to teach them.
Right.
I'm just excited to learn as much as I'm excited to teach.
Yeah. So I remember before becoming an educational developer, so I was contract faculty at different times. I was at Laurier, I was at Brock, I was at York, and I was also at Trent at different times and in different faculties. So I taught at the Applied Health Sciences faculty at Brock, and then it was in the faculties of education at the others. So before getting to that first day, it was a matter of trying to figure out where everything is, what the online platform was, if there was one, and if I was required to use it. Even finding out where the photocopier was. Did I have a space to put my stuff? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But what always struck me as being really interesting and hard was that it was never the same. Anywhere I went, it was never the same. But then once you kind of got that sorted, then you go with the flow. And so part of the excitement that builds to the first day, although it's scary and all those nervy type things that we've sort of acknowledged, once you get into the classroom, the students are the students and the content is the content, and you get into your own rhythm. And then it becomes fun. It's less about worrying and wondering where all these things are to get it done. Once you're in the classroom, if it's not done, it's not done. If you don't tell them, they don't know. But it's now you can have the conversations that you want to have. You can get to the things that really excite you the most about your content and about learning and about who they are as individuals. That's where everything else fades away. That's what I always loved.
Yeah, it's like so much of it is this internal pressure and worry that we put on ourselves when I think students, maybe we don't give them enough credit for if we're open to them about what's going on and sometimes why. I mean, sometimes we want to, we do things for a reason that necessarily the students won't be interested in, but if we can be as open as we can as to explaining why we're doing something and what the point is, I think the students are able to appreciate that. So based on that, what are your suggestions for new teachers? So what's your, maybe to wrap up this conversation, what would you recommend for new teachers starting out?
Well, I love what you said about, but both of you were talking about, like, this holding that space for both excitement and terror, if you will, at the same time. A person much smarter than me once said, it's possible to have two emotions at the same time. And so it's okay to be excited, and it's also okay to be scared. A lot of the times, in a healthy way, if you're anxious, it means you care. And if you're anxious or nervous or about to throw up, in a lot of ways, that just means you're passionate about and caring about what you do. So that's not to discount any feelings of nerves. And I'm the first and the last to tell you that that's real, but to know that it is going to be the unknown, and it is going to look and feel different and strange. And you don't know what you don't know, and you won't know until you get into the classroom. So trust yourself, trust that you're preparing, trust that you care. I mean, that care alone, I think, is going to see you through a lot, if not all, of the challenges that you're going to face.
That's lovely.
Oh,
I really like that. So I think about, so the logistical stuff, plan what you can, go see your room, see what the technology is, what's available, what's not available. Are you even able to try it out? I know that's not always the case, but if you can do that stuff in advance, it's less to worry about on that actual first day of class. Things happen, and so I mentioned about my contract faculty stories. That wasn't always going to be an option, but if it's possible, do it. And also for a lot of graduate students or for new hires, you're often tossed a course right at the last minute, so it's within reason. Do what you can. But I think the biggest piece of advice that I would offer to anybody, regardless of where they are in their career, is talk to your students. Whatever your sort of end goals about conversing with them or developing a relationship with those students are, they are still learners. And being open and transparent about what you're doing in your classroom and why, even if it means maybe being a little bit vulnerable and taking some risks, they're going to applaud that, and they're going to see that, and they're going to see the genuine authenticity that you bring of yourself to your classroom. And I think that is going to be one of the most important tools in your toolbox to making the learning environment a relevant and special one.
Awesome. And just to kind of feed off of that, being able to have fun with it, right? So don't be afraid to try different things to keep your students engaged. And even if that might sound cliche at this point, but another thing, your students will feed off of your energy. So if you come in feeling kind of down and out or not interested in material, your students will pick up on that. So you have to be able to be on during class time, be able to focus your energy on what you're doing with your class. And that comes more easily than not to some people, but I think being consciously aware of how you are projecting yourself in front of your classroom goes a long way. And if you're able to have that positive energy, I think you'll find both you and your students having more of an enjoying yourselves a lot more.
Yeah, especially if you only have 36 hours in front of them. And how do you make the most use of that day and a half? Right? You've got a day and a half to engage, support, welcome, all those good things. Yeah.
All right. Well, happy September, everybody.
Happy September.
Yeah, here we go.
Thanks for listening to this episode. To learn more about the Teaching Commons or to access a summary of our podcast, please visit teachingcommons.yorku.ca. Join us, Brian, Lisa, and Mandy, next time in the Big Red Chair on TC Talks. Classroom goes a long way, and if you're able to have that positive energy, I think you'll find both you and your students having more of an enjoying yourselves a lot more.
Yeah, especially if you only have 36 hours in front of them. And how do you make the most use of that day and a half? Right? You've got a day and a half to engage, support, welcome, all those good things. Yeah.
All right. Well, happy September, everybody.
Happy September.
Yeah, here we go.
Thanks for listening to this episode. To learn more about the Teaching Commons or to access a summary of our podcast, please visit teachingcommons.yorku.ca. Join us, Brian, Lisa, and Mandy, next time in the Big Red Chair on TC Talks.